The selection hall holds its breath. 9 women stand inside the gold rope circle, gowns pressed, spines straight, faces arranged into the particular expression of people who have practiced being chosen. Candlelight moves across silk and pearls and carefully powdered skin. The air carries rose water and something underneath it, tension, the kind that lives in rooms where power is about to change hands. Sereth Vale stands outside the circle. No pedestal, no candelabra angled to catch her best side. She holds a ledger against her chest, dark leather, corners soft from handling, pages dense with numbers that certain people in this room would pay considerably to have destroyed. And she occupies the peripheral zone, where servants wait, and the categorized irrelevant are stored until they are needed for something minor and then forgotten again. The document attached to her name reads, Non-viable, Wolf manifestation, absent, selection eligibility, suspended. She has read it, she filed it, she moved on. At exactly 20, the main doors open. Alpha King Riven Kalor does not enter the way men who perform power enter. He does not pause in the doorway. He does not wait for the room to turn. He walks the center aisle like a man finishing a thought he started somewhere else. Dark coat, no crest displayed, eyes moving across the candidates with the expression of someone doing arithmetic in a language nobody else in the room speaks. The first candidate steps forward. House Aldenbrook, Northern Territories. A bloodline registry that reads like a trophy wall. Her presentation is flawless, measured pace, practiced warmth, every alliance benefit laid out in sequence, like silverware arranged for a formal dinner. Riven dismisses her in 90 seconds. The second, House Morenth, Coastal Roots, impeccable documentation. 62 seconds. The third candidate does not finish her second sentence. By the 5th dismissal, the noble observers, seated along the far wall, have stopped murmuring among themselves. By the 6th, 3 council members are exchanging looks that have nothing comfortable in them. Each woman offers the same architecture territory for access, bloodline for legitimacy, political infrastructure in exchange for a crown, different names, different gowns, the same transaction dressed in 10 variations of the same costume. The system is not selecting a queen. It is moving power between the same hands that have always held it, keeping it warm, making certain it never leaves the circle. Riven stops walking. Hi viewers. When you watched someone in your life get overlooked for something they were clearly the most qualified for, did you say something? Or did you stay quiet? Drop your answer below. He turns. Not toward the remaining candidates. Not toward the council. Toward the periphery, toward the zone where the irrelevant are stored. And Sereth feels the shift in the room before she processes that he is looking directly at her. 3 council members move in their seats at the same moment. Not dramatically. The small, controlled movement of people making a decision about whether to act, and choosing, for now, not to. Riven walks to her. She does not step back. She does not lower the ledger. She does not perform the downward gaze that women in positions like hers learn before they learn anything else, and practice every single day until it becomes indistinguishable from instinct. He looks at the ledger, then at her face. Who compiled this? I corrected it. Not I made it. Not I found it. Corrected. The original was wrong. She fixed what someone else broke. The distinction is precise and deliberate, and she holds it in the space between them without apology. 32 seconds of silence. She counts them. Riven studies the open-page columns of bloodline entries, territorial records, transfer dates, and his expression does not shift, but something behind his eyes does. Something that looks like recognition of a kind he was not expecting tonight. He closes the ledger gently. Does not return it. He walks back to the center aisle, faces the hall. 9 candidates in their gold rope circle. Council members at attention. Observers holding the particular stillness of people, watching something they will need to describe accurately later. We are finished for this evening. The silence that follows is not relief. It is the sound of a room that does not know what just happened, but understands, at a biological level, that something has. Riven reaches the end of the aisle. He stops once more, looks back not at the candidates, not at the council, at the ledger now tucked under his arm, at the numbers inside it that someone in this room does not want him to read. 3 council members watch him leave. Their faces are composed, their hands are not. And in the peripheral zone, where the irrelevant are stored, Sereth Vale stands completely still and asks herself the question that will drive the next 11 days of her life. What did he see in a record no one else questioned? Did Riven make the right move walking away from all 10 noble brides, or did he just start a war he doesn't know is coming? Tell me what you think is really going on. Comment below right now. The archive door closes at midnight. Sareth is still inside at 2 a.m, cross-referencing candidate bloodlines against territorial acquisition records from the past 30 years, when she finds the first seam. House Aldenbrook, Northern Territories, logged in the 3rd registry under a transfer date that predates, by exactly 4 days, the succession law that made that transfer legal. 4 days. Not an accident. Not a clerical error. A window deliberately used, carefully papered over, filed under a classification dense enough that anyone running a routine check would move past it without pausing. She marks it, unsigned, as she always does. She moves to the next file. House Morenth, the coastal routes, the impeccable documentation. She finds the seam inside 20 minutes, this time a lineage branch that should have triggered a dual claim review. Never triggered. The relevant notation removed from the intake log and replaced with a clean confirmation stamp. The confirmation stamp uses a seal that was retired 8 years ago. Someone stamped a current document with a retired seal and filed it in a registry that gets reviewed approximately never. She moves to the next file. By 3 a.m, 7 families carry the same signature, different surfaces, different methods of concealment, but underneath each one, the same fundamental architecture. This is not 7 separate decisions made by 7 separate people. This is one method applied across 7 targets, by someone who understood the registry system well enough to know exactly where to hide things inside it. Someone designed this. At 9, a royal messenger arrives. No letter, no explanation. Just a folded document bearing the king's seal pressed in red wax, requesting the bloodline registry files she worked with last night. She packages them carefully. All of them, including the pages carrying her unsigned corrections, marked in her particular shorthand small, precise annotations in the margin that point directly at the seam without naming it. He will either see what she sees, or he won't. By afternoon, the archive intake logs show that Riven has requested verification from a secondary record-keeping body located outside the main palace infrastructure. A body that answers to the crown directly and has no operational overlap with the council's administrative office. He is running an audit through a channel the council cannot access or monitor. She stands at her desk for a long moment and processes the fact that 3 months ago, she submitted a formal query through the standard process, documented the same discrepancies, filed the same concerns, followed every step of the correct procedure, and received a 1-line dismissal. Registry integrity confirmed. No action required. The council had reviewed the council. The system that was broken had evaluated whether it was broken and found itself sound. She had known this would happen. She had filed the query anyway. She files everything. Evidence of character, her mother once said, is what you do when no one is watching, and no outcome is guaranteed. Now someone is watching. Now there is an independent audit running through a clean channel. She should feel relieved. She checks the registry shelf count instead of habit. Automatic. The kind of thing I does the way other people check that a door is locked. 3 pages are missing. Not misfiled, not pulled for review with a logged removal slip. Gone. The gap in the shelf sequence is clean and deliberate. The remaining files closed up against each other to reduce visible space. The kind of careful removal that takes longer than a careless one. Someone was in this archive after she left last night. Someone who knew exactly which 3 pages to take. She pulls her chair to the desk and begins copying the contents of every sensitive file by hand. She works without stopping. Her handwriting is small, and she can cover a page in 10 minutes. She has a great deal to cover. Who has been altering bloodline records and why? The answer is forming at the edges of what she can prove. Taking shape the way a face emerges from a crowd not all at once, but suddenly impossible to unsee. She is not ready to name it yet. She keeps copying. And then, at the bottom of a territorial transfer file for an estate in the southeastern corridor, she finds a notation that stops her hand entirely. The estate changed ownership 30 years ago. The previous owner is listed in the margin, crossed out with a single line, the replacement name written above it in a different ink. The previous owner's name she recognizes, because it belongs to a family that no longer exists. Because the last member of that family died in a palace poisoning that was officially attributed to external aggression and closed in 11 days. She stares at the name for a long time. The Dreven Queen. What is her family's estate doing in a territorial transfer file from the week after her death? The session notice arrives at 7:30. Sareth learns about it at 10:45 from a junior archivist named Priya, Who mentions it the way people mention things they assume are already known casually, mid-task, not looking up from the intake log she is sorting. Did the policy memo affect your access categories at all? Sareth sets down the file she is holding. Which policy memo? Priya looks up then. The particular expression of someone realizing they have said something they did not mean to say first. The session's formal output is a single paragraph. Personnel in sensitive archival roles who present systemic stability concerns, defined as wolf manifestation, absence, documented or observed, represent unacceptable risk to registry integrity during periods of active review. Reassignment to non-sensitive functions recommended pending council evaluation. No name attached. One person in archive services fits the description. By 14, 2 council guards are standing at the archive entrance. They are polite. They use words like procedure and transition and temporary reassignment. One of them is holding a transfer document with a same-day effective stamp, the kind that requires a council vote to issue, which means this was prepared before this morning's session, which means someone decided this was happening before they held the session that produced the policy justifying it. Sareth picks up her ledger. She is calculating the distance to the secondary exit when she hears the voice. Step aside. Reuven. Not at the council chambers. Not at any of the 17 locations where a king is supposed to be at 2 in the afternoon on a working day. Here. In the archive corridor, 2 floors below the main administrative level, where the lighting is poor and the ceiling is low, and there is genuinely no protocol for a king to be present because the situation has never arisen. He looks at the guards with the expression of a man who has already finished the conversation he is about to have. They step aside. He does not look at Sareth with warmth. He does not reassure her. He does not explain himself in any way that would give her something to hold on to later. He says, "Archival oversight. You report to that function now." Then he walks away. She stands in the corridor with her ledger and the 2 guards, who are now looking at each other with the particular blankness of people whose instructions have just become irrelevant without anyone officially canceling them. She walks back to her desk. She sits down. She thinks about what just happened with the calm and precision of someone who has learned that processing things immediately is more efficient than processing them later, when they have had time to grow complicated. The king just protected her. Without explanation, without political cover, without anything that could be described as a reasonable justification for why the most powerful person in this kingdom walked into an archive basement to stop 2 guards from reassigning a non-shifting archivist. Why would a king protect someone officially deemed useless? She does not have an answer. She files the question and returns to work. At 19, the archive empties. The candles burn to their second marks. Outside, the palace moves through its evening routines, meals, reports, the administrative close of the day, and inside, Sareth reaches the 3rd shelf from the bottom on the east wall, where the oldest files are stored in sequence by decade. She is looking for cross-references to the Dreven estate transfer. She finds something else. Unmarked. No classification stamp. Filed between 2 unremarkable territorial boundary records from 31 years ago, so thin that someone scanning the shelf would register it as part of the neighboring file, rather than its own document. She opens it. The header reads, Failed Alpha Succession Internal Review. Classification. Sealed. The seal was broken before she touched it. Someone read this recently. Someone who did not refile it correctly, or who refiled it exactly where they intended, counting on the assumption that no one would ever reach the 3rd shelf from the bottom, on the east wall at 7 in the evening, looking for something entirely different. She reads the first page. Then she sits down on the archive floor, which she has never done in 4 years of working here, and reads the rest of it. And when she is finished, she understands that what she has been mapping, the fraudulent bloodlines, the fabricated transfer records, the retired seal stamped on current documents is not the beginning of this. It is the continuation. What happened to the last queen selected through this system, and who made certain the answer stayed buried for 30 years? She looks at the file in her hands. She looks at the date on the internal review header. She looks at the name of the council member who authorized the sealed classification. The archive is very quiet. Her hands are completely steady. The file documents 29 pages. Sareth reads all of them twice. The queen selected 3 decades prior was Adai's Drevan house. Drevan, Northern bloodline, a lineage registry that read flawlessly at the time of selection, and was validated by full council review. She was 21 years old. She was dead before her first year in the palace ended. The official cause: rival pack aggression, external origin, no internal parties identified. Investigation closed in 11 days. 11 days. The file tells a different story. Buried under the clean narrative of the official record is the original bloodline verification submitted before the selection was finalized, the actual document, not the version that went into the permanent registry. The original shows a contested alpha succession 3 generations back in the Dravon line. Not scandalous, not disqualifying on its own, but the kind of lineage detail that creates rival claims distant relatives with historical standing to contest the queen's legitimacy, which means standing to contest the king's heir's legitimacy, which means a pressure point that someone with the right knowledge could press at exactly the right moment. Someone had selected a queen whose bloodline contained a built-in vulnerability, and someone had known before the selection was finalized. The original document was replaced. The replacement was clean, the contested succession branch removed, the lineage smoothed into an unbroken line. The validation stamp on the replacement document uses a method that Sareth recognizes because she has been looking at validation stamps for 4 years, and this specific sequence of notation, appears on 6 of the 7 fraudulent records she has already mapped in the current candidate files. Same hand, same method, 30 years apart. She sits with this for a long time. She does not have a wolf. She has never shifted, has never felt the particular pressure behind the sternum that pack members describe as the animal becoming aware of itself. What she has, and she has understood this slowly, without language for it, without anyone to compare notes with, is a different kind of perception. Data carries texture for her. Records that have been altered feel different from records that are intact. The way a healed bone feels different from one that was never broken. Not visually, not immediately, but present, if you know how to press. She has never named this to anyone. She has used it every day for 4 years. The current candidate files. She has already flagged 3 of them not because she could articulate what was wrong, but because they felt wrong. And when she went looking for the wrongness, she found it. The same lacquer, the same smoothed lineage branch, the same fabricated continuity over a contested crack. She pulls those 3 files now and lays them beside the Drevin original. Side by side, the connection is visible even without her particular sensitivity. The notation sequences in the fraudulent sections carry the same structural rhythm, the same choices made in the same order, the same information prioritized, and the same information suppressed. This is not a copycat. Copycats study the method from the outside. This is someone who knows the method from the inside because they built it. She begins documenting the parallel in precise detail. Every notation sequence mapped to its counterpart. Every suppressed data point identified and sourced. Every timestamp cross-referenced against council meeting records, registry access logs, and the internal approval chain for validation stamps, going back 32 years. At 23, she finds the 3rd connection. Not in the bloodline files, in the territorial records. Adaiz Drevon's family estate, the transfer she found last night, the name crossed out in a single line transferred to a new owner within 6 days of the Queen's death. The new owner is listed under a legal alias, a shell structure used for property holdings by council members who want distance between their public role and their private acquisitions. She traces the alias through 4 registry cross-references. The estate went to a man who, at the time of the transfer, held the position of junior records administrator in the palace archive system, who has since risen, over 30 years, to the position of chief council architect. Councillor Virex. She writes his name on a clean page. First time she has written it in 4 years of tracking the shape of what he built. She writes it in her regular handwriting, without ceremony, the way she writes everything precise, small, certain. Then she pulls the candidate file for the 3 fraudulent bloodlines and checks the validation approval chain for each one. All 3 signed off at the senior council level. All 3 carry Virex's authorization code. She has 2 pieces of solid evidence now. She needs a 3rd something that connects Virex not just to the fraud, but to the Drevin poisoning. Something that makes the 30-year gap visible as a single continuous action, rather than 2 separate events. She leans back in her chair and thinks about where a man who built this system would store the thing he could not destroy. Because men who build systems like this never destroy the proof entirely. They bury it. They classify it. They file it on the 3rd shelf from the bottom on the east wall where the lighting is poor and the ceiling is low. They keep it because power requires leverage, and leverage requires documentation, and documentation, if you know where to look, can always be found. She identified forged alpha bloodline signatures among the current candidates and traced them to one hand, 30 years old, still signing documents today. One piece of evidence still missing. One connection that closes the case permanently. And Sirith already knows which shelf it's on. He comes at 21. No announcement. No guard stationed outside. The archive door opens and closes, and Riven is standing at the far end of the room, and Sirith does not look up immediately because she is in the middle of a notation, and she finishes it first. She sets her pen down, looks up. He is watching her with the expression of someone who arrived at a conclusion before he arrived at this room, and is now checking whether the room confirms it. You found something. Not a question. A statement offered as an opening, the kind of conversational move made by people who already know the answer and want to hear how you tell it. I found what someone tried to hide, she says. Show me. She does not give him a summary first. She does not frame it or soften the edges or build toward the reveal with careful preparation. She lays 3 files on the table and walks him through it in sequence. Original data, falsified replacement, notation method, structural parallel to the Dreven case, territorial transfer, authorization chain, Virex. She speaks in the same voice she uses to read back registry entries, flat, precise, moving at the pace of the evidence rather than the pace of drama. Riven listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he is quiet for a moment. Then he asks, the notation sequences, how are you connecting them across 30 years of separate records? Good question. The exact right question, the load-bearing assumption in her analysis. Pressed directly. They carry the same rhythm, she says. The same decisions made in the same order, same information prioritized, same information suppressed. That's a pattern recognition argument, not a documentation argument. Yes, which is why I cross-referenced the authorization code separately. She pulls the 3rd page. This is the documentation argument. He studies it, reads it twice, looks up. You submitted a query 3 months ago. Standard process, 1-line dismissal. Registry integrity confirmed. The counsel reviewed the counsel. He sets the page down. What is your ability, exactly? The question lands differently than she expected. Not skeptical, not clinical. Genuine, the particular tone of someone who has been watching a phenomenon occur and wants to understand its mechanism. She thinks about how to answer it honestly. I see where things don't fit, she says. Records. Bloodlines. The way people tell the story of their own history. There's a place where fabricated data breaks from real data. Not visually, not in any way I can fully explain, but I register it. I've always registered it. Since when? Since I started working with records, possibly before. And the council knows you have this ability? The council knows I don't shift. That classification made everything else invisible. Riven is quiet again. This silence has a different quality than the first one. Less assessment, more something being decided. The 3 candidates you flagged, he says. Directly connected to Virex. 2 confirmed. 1 probable. I need 1 more cross-reference to make it solid. How long? Tonight. If the file I need is still on the shelf. He looks at her for a moment. Not with the warmth of someone who has decided to trust her. With the specific focus of someone who has run the available calculations and identified which variable produces the most reliable outcome. The independent audit, he says. The body I engaged outside council oversight. They will need a source document for the Dreven connection. I have it. The original bloodline verification. Yes. How? It was filed in a sealed review document on the east wall, 3rd shelf from the bottom, between 2 boundary records from 31 years ago. She pauses. The seal was already broken when I found it. Something moves behind his eyes. Fast. Gone. Someone else found it first, he says. Someone read it and refiled it. They weren't careful about the spine alignment. Virex. Or someone working for him, checking whether it had been disturbed. Riven stands, moves toward the door, stops. He turns back with the particular movement of someone who made a decision 2 steps ago, and is only now expressing it. You corrected 47 registry errors, in 4 years, unsigned. Yes. Why unsigned? She thinks about this. The real answer, because I wasn't correcting them for credit, she says. I was correcting them because they were wrong. He looks at her for 3 seconds, then he walks out. The archive settles back into quiet, candles at their 4th burn mark. The files still spread across the table, the evidence laid out in sequence, the shape of 30 years of deliberate fraud, visible now to anyone who knows how to press the right places. The next morning, Riven cancels the final selection ceremony. No precedent for it. No explanation issued. A written notice, delivered to the council at 8, formal and brief, using the precise legal language of a Crown decision that does not require justification. In 40 years of Alpha succession protocol, it has never happened. By 8:45, Councillor Virex has called 3 private meetings. By 9, Sirith's archive access has been quietly restricted in 3 file categories. She had finished copying everything in those categories at 3 that morning. What does Virex do when he realizes the evidence is already out of his reach? And who, exactly, was in this archive before Sirith found the sealed file? What would you have done, kept correcting the records in silence? Or gone straight to the king the moment you found the first fake entry? Drop your answer in the comments, I want to know. Marin sets a cup of tea on Sirith's desk at 8:12 and smiles the way she always smiles. Warm, unhurried, the particular ease of someone who has nowhere pressing to be. Sirith says thank you. She does not drink it. She watches Marin walk back to her own station, pull up the intake log, begin sorting the morning's request slips with practiced efficiency, and she thinks about the 3 file categories that were quietly restricted overnight, the ones she finished copying at 03:00, and she thinks about how someone had to know which 3 categories to restrict. Not the whole archive, not a broad sweep, 3 specific categories, selected with the precision of someone who understood exactly what those files contained, and exactly why they needed to be walled off before the independent audit could reach them. The restriction request would have required a name, a source. Someone who knew what Sirith had been working on closely enough to identify the exact documents she was building her case from. She looks at Marin's back. 2 years they have worked beside each other, shared the early morning quiet before the archive opened, covered each other's intake shifts during the high-volume periods around council sessions. Marin had never asked questions about Sirith's after-hours work, which Sirith had registered as consideration and is now rereading as intention. She does not react. She files the information the same way she files everything, precisely, completely, without letting the emotional weight of it distort the shape of the fact. By 10, the council has issued a second memo. This one is not about reassignment. It is about the independent audit body Riven engaged specifically, a formal challenge to its jurisdictional standing. The memo argues, in 7 careful paragraphs, that any audit of palace registry records must pass through the council's administrative review process before findings can be submitted to the Crown. It cites 4 precedents. All 4 are real. All 4 were written into law during periods when the council controlled who sat on the audit body. It is a legal wall, constructed quickly and with genuine craftsmanship. Sirith reads the memo twice. Then she pulls the original charter documents for the independent audit body, which she had copied 3 weeks ago for unrelated reasons, and finds the jurisdictional clause that the council's 7 paragraphs do not mention, because mentioning it would invalidate their entire argument. She writes a 1-page response, cites the clause, notes the omission, signs it with her full name and her archival oversight title, the one Riven assigned her 4 days ago, the one that places her function under Crown authority, rather than council jurisdiction. She files the response through the Crown's direct submission channel. At 13, the council calls an emergency session. At 14:30, Riven delays the final selection ceremony by 14 additional days. By 17, 3 noble families connected to the fraudulent candidate bloodlines have quietly engaged private legal representatives, not publicly. Through back channels, the kind of legal activity that does not appear in official records, but leaves traces in the scheduling logs of the 3 most expensive legal firms in the capital. They are preparing for exposure. They know it is coming. What they do not know is how much she already has. At 18:45, a source Sirith has been protecting a junior records clerk in the Eastern Territorial Office who had agreed to verify a specific transfer date goes silent. No response to her written query. No message through the secondary channel they had established. Nothing. She sends 1 follow-up. Waits 40 minutes. No response. She does not send a third. She sits very still at her desk and processes what this means. Not what she fears it means, what the available evidence indicates. A source going silent overnight, after a council emergency session, after a legal memo designed to close the audit channel. This is not coincidence. This is coordination. Someone reached her source before she could protect them, which means someone knows her network, which means Marin's cooperation is not the only leak in this room. She begins reviewing the past 6 weeks of her own working patterns, what she accessed, when, in what sequence, which materials she handled in view of others. And by 1930 she has identified 4 additional exposure points she had not previously accounted for. She is more visible than she understood herself to be. At 20, she finds the document she has been looking for since the night she read the sealed file. Buried in the financial transfer records for the Southeastern Corridor. A payment authorization, 31 years old, dry and administrative on the surface, for a private medical consultation arranged through the palace's internal service channel. The consultant's name is coded. The patient's name is not. Adaze Dreven. Consulted 6 weeks before she died. The nature of the consultation. Toxicology assessment. Adaze had known something was wrong. She had sought a private assessment. The assessment was arranged through the palace system, meaning someone inside the palace facilitated her access to that consultation. The authorization signature at the bottom of the payment record belongs to the junior records administrator who processed it on the council's behalf. Virex, 31 years younger. His handwriting smaller then, more careful, not yet practiced in the particular confidence of a man who has been signing things unchallenged for 3 decades. He had arranged the consultation. He had known she was worried about toxin exposure. He had known, and he had arranged for her to receive an assessment that documented her concern, that created a paper trail showing she knew she was in danger, that could later be used to support a narrative of paranoia if anyone ever looked too closely. He had built her exit before she knew she needed one. Sereth's hand is on the page, completely steady. Her name has just appeared on an internal council document. Classification: expendable risk. The word expendable is doing a great deal of work in that sentence, and she has not yet told Reven what she just found. The T is wrong. Not in any way a person running a routine morning would catch. The color is right. The temperature is right. The smell carries the same dried citrus and cardamom that the palace kitchen has used in its archive blend for 11 years. The undertone is not right. It is faint, barely present, the kind of chemical note that sits beneath the surface of the correct scent, the way a wrong number sits beneath a correct sum. Present only if you are looking. Present only if you have read, at some point in 4 years of working with historical records, a detailed toxicological assessment of a compound called veleth root. Its properties, its delivery method, its particular signature in warm liquid, the way it was used in one documented palace poisoning 31 years ago. She sets the cup down. She does not do it slowly. She sets it down in one clean motion, and stands and walks to the archive sink, and pours it out, and stands over the drain, watching the liquid disappear. Then she picks up the empty cup and examines the residue at the bottom. Veleth root metabolizes into a specific crystalline deposit in warm ceramic. The deposit is small. It is unmistakable if you know what you are looking at. She knows what she is looking at. She is still standing at the sink, cup in hand, running the available calculations with the focused calm of someone who has just confirmed a hypothesis they genuinely hoped was wrong. When the archive door opens and Reven walks in, he sees the cup. He sees her face. He reads both in approximately 2 seconds. He does not ask what happened. He crosses the room, positions himself between her and the main door, and says 2 words to the guard, outside words she cannot hear through the door, and then he turns back to her. "Did you drink any of it?" "No." "How long ago was it placed on your desk?" 8:12. Marin brought it. Something moves across his face. Fast. "Where is she now?" "She left at 8:30. Standard morning shift end." He says nothing. He is thinking she can see it. The quality of stillness that is not absence of activity but intense internal processing. The same expression he had when he read the authorization chain in the candidate files and arrived at a conclusion before she finished explaining it. The palace physician arrives in 4 minutes. She is a compact woman named Dr. Celestine Ibarra, gray-laced hair, hands that move with the efficiency of someone who has been making quick, accurate assessments in difficult conditions for 30 years. She examines the cup residue. She takes a small sample. She looks at Sereth with the particular focused attention of someone running a medical assessment and conducting a separate, private evaluation at the same time. "You didn't drink it," she says. "No." "How did you know?" "I've read about this compound." Dr. Ibarra looks at the cup again, then at Reven, then back at the cup. "Veleth root," she says. "This is the second time this compound has appeared in a palace record in my career. The first time was in a post-mortem toxicology report I reviewed during my residency." She pauses. 31 years ago. The room holds that sentence for a moment. Riven says. Tribunal. Public. 3 days. Not a question. Not a proposal. A decision already made, expressed in the compressed language of a man who has finished deliberating and is now in execution mode. Dr. Ibarra nods once. She seals the cup sample, labels it, and leaves without another word. The archive is quiet. Sareth is still standing at the sink. She is thinking about Marin 2 years of early mornings, intake shifts, the particular ease of someone who has nowhere pressing to be, and she is thinking about how trust, once examined under sufficient pressure, reveals the exact point where it was constructed rather than grown. There's a payment authorization, she says. 31 years old. Virex arranged a private toxicology consultation for Adiz Drevon 6 weeks before she died. He knew she was concerned about poisoning. He documented her concern through official channels. He created a record that could support a paranoia narrative if the investigation ever looked inward. Riven turns from the window. He built the evidence that would protect him before the crime was committed, he says. Yes, you have the document. I copied it 3 weeks ago, before the file categories were restricted. He looks at her for a long moment. The expression on his face is not warmth. It is the specific recognition of someone understanding, for the first time at full scale, what they are dealing with. 3 days, he says again. She nods. She needs 2 more cross-references. She has been working toward them for 72 hours. She knows where they are. She knows what they will show. She knows, now, that someone in this palace received an order to stop her from reaching them, and that the order was given, and the method chosen, and the delivery arranged, all before 08:12 this morning when Marin set a cup of tea on her desk and smiled the way she always smiles. Who gave the order? Virex is the architect, but architects require builders, and builders require instructions. Sareth has 72 hours to find the third connection. Riven has scheduled a public tribunal. Neither of them has accounted for what Virex will do in the time between now and then. The hall fills in 20 minutes. Word moves through a palace the way water moves through dry ground fast, taking the path of least resistance, arriving everywhere at once. By the time the council members take their formal seats, the observer gallery is standing room, nobility, senior staff, 3 territorial representatives who traveled overnight when the tribunal summons reached them, the 10 original candidates, arranged by royal instruction, in the same semicircle formation as the selection night. That detail is deliberate. Sareth had noted it in the logistics memo and said nothing. She stands at the presentation table, archive gray, dark leather ledger, the same posture she carries through every room she enters, straight, still, neither performing confidence nor suppressing it, just present, occupying her space with the calm of someone who has already done the work and is here to show it rather than argue it. Councillor Virex sits at the council table's center position, silver-haired, composed. He has had 3 days to prepare, which is 3 days more than he needed, and he sits with the bearing of a man who has survived 6 administrations by understanding exactly where the lines are drawn and exactly how to stand on the correct side of them. Riven takes his position at the head of the hall. He does not open with ceremony. He says, "Proceed." Sareth begins, not with accusation, with sequence. The first bloodline file, House Aldenbrook, original data, falsified replacement, notation method, timestamp. She speaks in the same voice she uses to read back registry entries, flat, precise, moving at the pace of evidence. She does not raise her voice to signal importance. The evidence signals its own importance. The second file. House Marenth, the retired seal stamped on a current document. The lineage branch that should have triggered dual claim review and did not. The third. A candidate whose name draws a sharp intake of breath from 3 people in the observer gallery because her family is present, seated in the 3rd row, and they are hearing this for the first time, along with everyone else. She lays the structural parallel on the table. Current fraud mapped to historical method. Notation sequences cross-referenced. Authorization chain identified. Virex's signature on every senior-level approval connected to the falsified records. The council denies in coordinated sequence. Councillor Drayden, heavy-set, reliably vocal, the council member most practiced at managing hostile room dynamics, leads the response. Registry integrity, established verification protocols, the documented instability of the source presenting these claims. He does not say non-shifter. He says individual with unverified systemic capacity, which is a more sophisticated version of the same dismissal and lands with the same weight. The observer gallery listens. Sereth lets him finish. Then she places the payment authorization on the table. The one bearing Virex's handwriting from 31 years ago. The one documenting his arrangement of a private toxicology consultation for Adaïs Dravan 6 weeks before her death. She explains what it means in 2 sentences. The hall goes quiet in a specific way, not the held quiet of a room waiting for what comes next, but the released quiet of a room that has just understood something it cannot ununderstand. Drayton pivots. The chain of custody for these documents is unverified. An unofficial audit conducted outside proper oversight cannot produce admissible evidence. The individual presenting this material has a documented classification that raises legitimate questions about the reliability of her analytical processes. Sereth opens the second document. The independent audit body's findings submitted through the Crown's direct channel, jurisdictionally clean, the Council's 7-paragraph challenge having failed on the exact clause she identified, validating every cross-reference she built. Independent verification. Different source. Same conclusion. The crowd begins to shift. Not dramatically. The way weight shifts in a structure when a load-bearing element moves slowly, then all at once. Drayton's next sentence does not land the same way his previous ones did. She can see it, the room is no longer receiving his words with the automatic credibility that council voices carry in council spaces. Something has changed in the quality of attention. She looks at Virex. He is still composed. He is watching her with the expression of a man who has identified the variable he needs to neutralize and is calculating the method. She knows what he is calculating. He is calculating that she cannot name him as the person who ordered the poisoning. She has the payment authorization. She has the method parallel. She has the structural connection. What she does not have, what she has been building toward, for 72 hours. And found in the second cross-reference she completed at 4 this morning is the direct link between Virex and the person who delivered the Velith route to the archive kitchen. She has it now. She has not shown it yet. She sets the third file on the table, face down. She places her hand flat on the cover, and she looks at Virex, and she pauses. The room knows something is coming. Virex knows what it is. Sereth is the only person in the hall who understands exactly what happens the moment she turns that page over. What is in that file? And why has Virex gone very, very still? Virex moves first. Not physically. Politically, the instinct of a man who has built 30 years of survival on the principle that the person who controls the frame controls the outcome. He stands. He addresses Riven directly, bypassing Sereth entirely, speaking in the measured tone of a man presenting a reasonable position to a reasonable audience. The documents being presented, he says, represent a selective and misleading interpretation of legitimate administrative decisions made under difficult political circumstances 30 years ago. The bloodline verification adjustments were authorized to prevent destabilization during a contested succession period. The Dravan consultation was arranged as a service to the Queen, not as preparation for any action against her. The independent audit body, engaged by the Crown, has jurisdictional standing that the Council formally contests. And the individual conducting this presentation, he gestures towards Sereth without looking at her, operates under a documented classification that disqualifies her testimony as primary evidence under PAC succession law, subsection 4, paragraph 11. He has prepared for this exact moment. He is very good at this. 3 council members straighten in their seats. 2 noble observers in the gallery nod slightly, not agreement, but the involuntary response of people hearing a familiar argument delivered with conviction. Riven says, "Sworn testimony, under PAC oath." The hall goes still. PAC oath is not a formality. It is not the kind of legal structure that exists for procedural comfort. It is old law, older than the council, older than the monarchy in its current form, rooted in the PAC's foundational understanding that some truths are too consequential to be left to the unreliability of human choice. To speak falsely under PAC oath is not perjury in the legal sense. It is a severing from the PAC's ancestral bond, from the moon goddess's recognition, from the legitimacy that every alpha and every bloodline derives from that recognition. 3 people in the past century have tested whether it is enforced. The records of what followed are sealed. Virex knows this. Every person in this hall knows this. He sits down, stands back up, sits down again. The movement lasts 3 seconds and contains 30 years of calculation arriving at a conclusion he does not want. He testifies. He does not begin with the beginning. He begins with the version of events that preserves the most: a misunderstanding, a political necessity, a decision made in service of stability that perhaps exceeded its mandate. He qualifies each admission as he makes it, building a frame of mitigating context around every factual concession, the way a man walks through fire by moving fast enough that no single point of contact holds long enough to burn. But the facts underneath the frame are clear. He knew about the contested succession branch in Adai's Drevon's bloodline before the selection was finalized. He authorized the replacement document. He did not inform the king at the time, Raven's father, because the decision had already been made at the council level, and the council had determined that the selected queen's political value outweighed the lineage instability. He did not order her death. He states this 3 times, in 3 different phrasings, with the emphasis of a man who has decided this is the line he will hold, regardless of what else moves. Cirith lets him hold it. She turns over the file. The document is a service requisition palace internal system, logged through the kitchen supply channel for a botanical compound delivered to the archive wing. Dated 4 days before the morning, Marin set a cup of tea on her desk. The requisition is submitted under a service alias. The alias traces, through 2 administrative cross-references she completed at 4 and verified at 6 the morning of the tribunal, to a council office account. Vyrex's office, his account code, his alias, created 11 years ago for internal supply requisitions. He did not use the same method as 30 years ago. He used the same system, the same palace infrastructure, the same assumption that the channels he built would protect him because he was the one who built them. He ordered it. The document says so. The document he did not know she had, because he did not know she had copied the financial transfer archives 3 weeks before the restriction was placed on them. She lays it on the table. She does not speak. She lets the room read it. The council member to Vyrex's immediate left moves his chair 6 inches to the right. It is not a large movement. It is the largest movement in the room. Reuven stands. He has not spoken since he said sworn testimony. When he stands, the hall rearranges itself around him, the way rooms rearrange around people who carry real authority, not performance, not posture, but the weight of a decision already made. He looks at the council, at the candidates, at the observer gallery, at Vyrex, who is sitting with his hands flat on the table, and the expression of a man watching the structure he built for 30 years convert, in real time, into the thing that buries him. The council will stand down pending full review, Reuven says. All territorial claims connected to bloodline fraud identified in these proceedings are suspended effective immediately. Vyrex is removed from council function pending criminal investigation. 3 candidates withdraw, on the spot. Formal documents produced, signed, submitted without a word. Their legal representatives had been ready. The 3rd candidate's family in the observer gallery stands and leaves before Reuven finishes speaking. The hall is waiting. Everyone in it is waiting for the same thing, the thing that comes after the dismantling, the name of what replaces it. The answer to the question the entire selection process was supposed to answer before it turned into something else. Reuven turns. He is not looking at the remaining candidate from House Vareth young, uninvolved, her paperwork clean, standing in the semicircle with the expression of someone who showed up to one event and ended up inside a completely different one. He is not looking at the council. He is looking at Cirith. And the hall goes quiet in the way that rooms go quiet before something that cannot be taken back. Every person in this hall is holding the same breath. The noble families, the council, the candidates, the observers, who traveled overnight to be present for what they assumed would be a routine selection ceremony. None of them anticipated this. None of them are ready for what Reuven says next. The silence has weight. Not the silence of a room waiting for what it expects. The silence of a room that has stopped expecting anything, because everything it expected has already been wrong. The 10 pedestals are still in their semicircle. 9 of the women who stood on them have been removed from consideration, exposed, withdrawn, or quietly fled. The candelabras are burning at their 2nd hour. The hall smells of wax and old stone, and the particular tension of a space where something structural has just collapsed, and no one yet knows what will fill the space it left. Reuven does not move for 3 seconds. Then he crosses the floor, not toward the remaining candidate, not toward the council table, toward the presentation table, where Cirith stands with 3 closed files and her hands still, and her face carrying the specific calm of someone who has finished the work and is now simply present for the outcome. He stops in front of her. The hall watches. Give me the one they call useless. His voice does not rise. It does not perform. It does not bend toward the gallery or adjust for the audience. It carries the way a decision carries, not because it is announced, but because it is final. For 2 full seconds, no one in the hall makes a sound. Then it breaks. Not all at once in sequence, the way structural things fail. First, the silence fractures at the edges, a single voice near the back of the gallery, then a second, then the wave of it moving forward, voices over voices, someone invoking succession law, someone invoking precedent, a council member on his feet pointing toward Reven and speaking in the clipped, urgent tones of a man who knows he is too late, and is speaking anyway, because stopping would mean accepting how completely he is lost. Reven does not turn around. He is looking at Sereth. She looks back at him. She has processed a great many things in the past 11 days, the seams in the bloodline records, the shape of 30 years of coordinated fraud, the particular texture of a fabrication built with enough care to pass every routine check. She has processed the T and Marin, and the sealed file on the 3rd shelf from the bottom, and the payment authorization in Virex's handwriting from 31 years ago. She processes this. I don't shift, she says. Not an objection, not an apology. A fact offered the same way she offers every fact, precisely, without the softening that facts do not require. I know, Reven says. The selection law requires dominant wolf manifestation. The selection law was written by the council that just confessed to using it as a fraud mechanism for 30 years. He holds her gaze. I'm rewriting it. The gallery noise rises, and then when Reven turns, finally, to face the room, drops. He addresses the hall in the same compressed, final tone he has used all evening. The bloodline-based selection system is suspended permanently. A verification council will be established under Crown authority, independent of noble family oversight. All territorial claims logged over the past 30 years under families connected to the Virex network will be reviewed. The review process will be led by the archival oversight function. He pauses. The selection is complete. 3 noble families in the gallery stand and leave in sequence, not in protest, in retreat. Their legal representatives are already drafting, already calculating, already building the argument for why their specific territorial claims should be reviewed differently from the others. The remaining candidate from House Vereth clean paperwork, uninvolved, standing in the semicircle in a gold gown, she selected 3 weeks ago for a ceremony that turned out to be a different ceremony entirely, exhales and sits down on her pedestal. No one notices. She does not mind. Reven turns back to Sereth. He extends his hand. Not a romantic gesture, not a rescue. The specific gesture of one person offering another a position in a shared enterprise, the hand extended across a table at the start of something that will require both of them at full capacity for a very long time. She looks at his hand. She thinks about 4 years of unsigned corrections. 47 errors marked in margins and never acknowledged. Queries filed and dismissed in 1 line. The 3rd shelf from the bottom on the east wall, the cup of tea she did not drink, the payment authorization in handwriting 31 years old. She takes his hand. The hall erupts not in celebration, not in the clean release of a crowd that got what it wanted, but in the complicated noise of a room full of people who built their standing on a system that is now being dismantled publicly by the person it was designed to eliminate. It is not comfortable. It is exactly right. In the weeks that follow, the bloodline registry is rebuilt from the foundation. Territorial claims are suspended, reviewed, and in 11 cases reversed. 3 council members resign before formal proceedings begin. Virex's trial is scheduled for the spring session. The evidence against him is dense enough that his legal team has requested 4 months to prepare a response. The formal role of Auditor of Lineage Systems is created. There is no historical precedent for it. Sereth writes the charter herself. She holds the title of Queen. She uses the title of Auditor when she works. The work is what she uses. One morning, 6 weeks into the restructuring, Reven finds her in the archive at 2, 3 candles low, a stack of pre-reform territorial records spread across 3 tables, each page marked with her small, precise annotations. She is working through claims that predate both of them by a generation. Errors that no one caused and no one corrected, and no one was ever going to correct because no one with the ability to see them had ever been given the access. To reach them, he sits across from her without asking. He sets down 2 cups of tea, from a source she trusts, prepared by hands she verified herself 3 weeks ago, when she rebuilt the archive's supply chain from scratch. She looks up. 41 more errors in the pre-reform registry, she says. Minimum. I know, he says. I read your preliminary markings. It will take months. Then it takes months. She looks at him. The king who walked to the periphery of the selection hall when every convention of the evening told him to stay in the center aisle. Who ran a clean audit through a channel the council couldn't reach. Who asked 2 good questions in the quiet of the archive and listened to both answers completely. You decided before that night, she says. Before the tribunal, before the tea. I decided when I read the ledger, he says. You corrected 47 errors in 4 years, with no institutional support, no acknowledgement, no outcome guaranteed. You kept correcting them. He picks up his cup. That is not a small thing. She is quiet for a moment. Most people would have stopped, she says. Most people did, he says. You didn't. The candles breathe. The archive holds its particular nighttime quiet, the deep stillness of a room full of records, full of history, full of the accumulated truth of everything that was documented, and everything that was buried, and everything that is, now, finally being found. She picks up her pen. He picks up the file she finished and begins reading her annotations. They work. Power does not fall because someone fights it loudest. It falls because someone, in a room that nobody watches, with no guarantee that anyone is coming, keeps marking where it is broken. Sereth Vale was never the one they called useless. She was the only one doing the work that mattered. And the system that tried to erase her? She rewrote it from the inside. If this story moved you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told your contribution doesn't count, drop a comment below and tell me about it. Your story matters here. If you want more stories about the ones who were written off and came back to rewrite everything, subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a single chapter. Every story on this channel is built for the ones who kept going when stopping would have been easier. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being overlooked is not the same as being wrong. And come back for the next story because the most powerful people in any room are rarely the ones standing in the center of it. See you in the next one.